So this is something I wanted to do for a little while, ever since I was imagining the idea of making a very, very simple 2-page role-play game, Theater of the Mind, Zen Fantasy. It's available on drive-thru. And there's a lot of different Hex Crawl type of games that are being demonstrated online, and a lot of them are using the original Blue Book Wilderness Wandering Monster tables, or there are some even better ones, more intricate ones inside of the game Empire of the Petal Throne. And I was going to use the Theater of the Mind rules to actually run a hex crawl for you all here. Now, I could move my character across and use the same wandering monster tables of, in a woods, 1 or 2, 5 or 6, I'm lost. If I'm lost, I move to a random side hex. If I have an encounter, I roll in the encounter of the woods. I could meet a flyer on a roll of a 2 on a d8, and of those flyers, I could meet a Balrog. And when you think about that for a moment, that 1 out of every 100 encounters that you get, and you might be rolling these 3 times a day. So every 30 days you're going to meet a Balrog in the wilderness. You got to accept the fact that for you old school role players, that some of the stuff that was put out originally was to satisfy the play style of some people that didn't know exactly what they had at the time. They were very excited about it. They quickly advanced their characters. They even wrote parody articles on it in Dragon Magazine originally. But if you're really doing a hex crawl, and a sixth of the time you're lost as a hero, and a sixth of the time you're rolling on a D8 table where you could possibly meet flyers as Balrogs, or Berserkers would be lightweight, but you're going to meet red Martians, or you're going to meet a clutch of vampires, buccaneers. Well, okay, I don't want to make too trivial of it, because the idea of doing a solo adventure outside as a hex crawl is a very powerful and compelling one. And again, the tables refined even better with Empire of the Petal Thrones, where you had some very high percentage chances of running away from these large groups, or you had morale checks on the other side, so it wasn't just a meat grinder of dice rolls. But I'm going to run this using Theater of the Mind to simulate sort of a solo quest as I go across the Wilderness campaign map. And this one is, I just grabbed a screen capture from Battle Brothers, which is a wonderful game. If you don't own it and you play hex crawls, you should buy a copy of that game and give it a try. It would probably give you hours and hours of entertainment. And we're going to use the solo fantasy, the Zen Fantasy rules. And with the GM page, I'm going to just alternate between handy situations in start or handy situations in the middle, depending upon whether or not the terrain is difficult or not. We all know that a road is easy terrain, so that's probably a situation of start. And a swamp would be definitely middle terrain hard. And if I generate anything that moves on, I'll treat that move on as an additional action that I need to resolve, or a subquest that I need to push myself into. Now, this is very improv, but the whole game of Theater of the Mind, Zen Fantasy, is an improv style game. A lot of this stuff is coming straight from your imagination, and like everything in life, when you practice and do it, you'll get better. I find it entertaining, but let's see if you find it entertaining. 4 minutes in, I'm always worried about my time. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start in Schneerberg, and I'm going to try to get myself to Lurchin's Fest. And I could go over the mountains is the best way, because there's an old abandoned fortress here you might see, and another one here, and they're a couple of days apart. I could sort of make camp in each of those, but I would have to first get across the mountains. But if I don't take the mountain pass, I have to cross this swamp here, and there's also this nest of goblins along the way. A couple of sanctuaries in the middle, but these also get taken over at times by now you can see my character here from actually playing the game. You can see the fact that some of these fortresses along the way get taken over by your necromancers, and by your evil priests, and by bandit gangs. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get across this mountains, and that I'm going to call a critical deed. So I go to my character page here, and I'm going to play Duquesne. He's a barbarian. I'm going to try to get a critical deed. Now, the only table to get a critical deed on is the do something anything catch-all table, and it's a roll of a 6. So I'm going to roll as a barbarian 1 die looking for a 6, but I am destined when I start my quest, destined to get to, going back to really, destined to get to Lurchin Fest. Maybe I'm carrying a package, dispatches. The mail would be very important in a medieval world, even with your crystal balls. Maybe I'm carrying a sword. Maybe I'm meeting an army down there to join. If you need a whole list of quest ideas, of course, Better Games has got some beautiful ones that you can purchase as well on drive-thru. Let me go back to this right here with my character. Rolling 1 die, adding 1 to the dice roll, and here comes the first roll of the game. So 2 is a 3. Now 3 is a bad faith. So as I start to cross the mountains, it tells me, no, I'm not prepared to cross those mountains. It would take me 2 critical deeds, and I'm not prepared to do that. So I decided to take instead the straightforward path. Now again, if I went back to the wilderness rules, I could say that I'm here and clear or approaching a swamp, and I roll a 50-50 chance. And I could even demonstrate this right here with a couple of dice rolls. Say I'm approaching that swamp, 50-50 chance. It's a roll of 3, which means I'm lost. I would go back to the table here and I would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I roll a die. And I'd go 1. So I got lost and I went back here to Kinmere. Now I'll do that as a demonstration, but you would think that if I got lost and reached those mountains, that a part of my intellect as a hero would tell me, well, these are the same mountain range that was south of Schneerberg, so how lost could I really be if I knew that I could see those mountains off to my side? Again, Hex Crawl, don't be too tied to the dogma that it must be absolute. You need to run these things theater of the mind, and you need to be logical both for your own story and for your own enjoyment. So I'm up here in Kinmere. Now, if I head in this area up here, I'm going to definitely be out of the game map. I just need to go back where I'm going. And when I go back where I'm going, instead I'm going to go to this GM page. And with that GM page, I'm going to give myself a handy die 6 start here. And along the way, I rolled a 2. So I'm going to have a critical problem. Now, when I got that critical problem, perhaps it's the fact that I realized I didn't bring enough provisions. I just totally left myself in the dark here. But a critical problem could be the fact I could have a flooded river. I could be lost again. I could just be unfamiliar with the terrain. Let's go with lost. Now, why was I lost the first time? Because it was a swamp? No, it was a hex. The goblins themselves are trying to confuse me. They both want to keep warriors away from the camp and bring weaker prey in. And I don't fancy myself weak or prey, but if I solve a critical problem, I can reach the goblin camp and perhaps raid them. And now I got a story that I'm starting. So I entered into the forest here. There's one lone pine I use as a reference map. If I could just reach it again. But somehow, it was cloning itself all over. I knew it was goblin magic. So I'm back to my character here. Now I need both a critical deed and a critical insight. Tough rolls for me. In order to get the dice rolls I need to find the goblin camp. I'll start with the do something anything here. Let me give me a die roll here. I managed to find the tree I was looking for, and I realized the rest of my path were an illusion. If I just made myself a divining rod of sorts, I could perhaps get a more of a greater bearing. 2 dice, a 2. 2 plus 1, because I'm destined as the 3. Starting with these low rolls here is going to crush me. So now I need an extra critical deed to resolve. So that would be 2 critical deeds and 1 critical insight. That's tough for Duquesne, especially since I'm rolling 2 dice on this magic table and subtracting 1. Let me see what the result is up here. I was confused. I was blinded. It was snowing for no reason in the middle of the summer. 2 dice. Take the lower of 3, but I am destined, and with that destined plus 1, I alter the cosmos. I knew, in my own logic, that this was not winter, and the wolves I hear howling were just illusions. I had to quiet my mind. I shoved wax in my ears. I chewed on a bitter root so I could concentrate on nothing but the foul taste in my mouth. So now I'm rolling 3 dice to resolve the action. I still need a critical insight. I still need 2 critical deeds. I'll go back to my critical deed table here, but I'm rolling 3 dice and taking the better, and I'm adding 1 to each roll. The route worked. I was able to move past and find the small river junction. I could clearly see the mountains to the south. I was on my way to the goblin camp. Their chieftain would have quite a row with me when I got there. 3 dice, a 6, plus 1 is a 7, is going to give me that first critical deed. With that first critical deed, or I could heal myself, I happen to be injured. I could defeat a minion on this table, but I'm a barbarian, and my best combat is up here. You'll see that in a moment if I get there. So I completed the first critical deed easily enough. I had tramped almost to the edge of the swamp. I was going to try to stay between the swamp and the mountains. That'll be my second critical deed. I go back to my character table, 3 dice because I'm still in the same scene. 5, 3, and 4. The 5 becomes a 6 because I'm destined, is once again I got my critical deed. But here's where the insight comes in, and the insight is tough because I'm rolling 3 dice and taking the lower. So if I make the insight roll, I will surprise them in their camp and maybe face half the numbers in order to succeed, get right up there to kill the main boss. But if I fail this critical insight roll, or if I find that it's going to be almost impossible for me to make, then I'll double the number, I'll take on a D6 henchman, and I'll take on a great mob. Now, does a great mob have a subtraction? Not in this game. And later on in some of the other 2-page roleplay games, you'll start to see fighting the greatest monster of that genre is going to have a subtraction roll. Each of these games is unique. You look at them and at first glance you say, well, they're all the same except for some clip art that I added into. But they're not all the same. I pride myself on matching the mechanics to the situation. So the mechanics in Gorefest, the Grindhouse 2-page roleplay, are entirely different in their flavor and the results they generate than even just the horror, the Vampire Hunter game, which is coming, or the original astronaut survival game, or the one that we had out last week, a survival game. And we have superheroes and super spies, cyberpunk, and if I hit all the genres, well, they're going to be coming. Chivalry Knights, and you can also look for a number of 1-page supplements to actually generate play for an afternoon, either solo, co-op, or with your buddies as the referee. Get back to this quest. I'm rolling 3 dice here and taking the lower. Now, that seems like an impossible thing, but we call it a Tony roll. Now, a 3 dice roll and take the lower here. The lowest one is a 2. I add 1 because I'm destined, and it's a 3. Then the spirit wanes. Become a rapscallion for the remainder of the action. But I lose my destined status. That actually is an advantage right here, because by no longer being a barbarian, I have to roll 3 dice on the magic table. I roll 3 dice as a rapscallion, and rolling 3 dice as a rapscallion means that I can possibly get my destined status back and possibly get that critical insight back so that I can attack the goblins directly. I'm still moving across the map here. I'm trying to come in on the goblin lair here, and here I go back to my character page. I could see their tents, and I could smell the foul pork that they grilled. They seemed to boil the intestines and then grill them on the fire without cleaning the animal in any way. Now let's see if I can get this roll for 3 dice here. And 3 dice, I rolled a 6. I'm not destined, but that's what I'll pick up first. Seeing them realize my destiny was to kill this leader. Maybe I wasn't going to join the mercenary groups. Maybe I was just going to take the bounty and live a little bit high on the hog for a bit in Lurchenfest. So I move over to the table here. I'm 3 dice on this table, looking for a critical insight to surprise them. And here comes my 3 dice roll. Still rolling as a rapscallion for the rest of the scene. 3 dice. A 6, 2, and a 2. So I got my critical insight. I already have my destined status. And I have reached the camp here in my quest. And now I'm going to attack the goblins. Now I'm going to say it's going to be, first I have to get through a D6 of the minion goblins, you know, the henchmen. Just 1. The foul fools. They didn't even have a guard. They thought their magic was going to stop anyone from coming near. I took him by surprise and just throttled him around the neck. Now this would count as a new scene. I lost my Alter the Cosmos status. I'm no longer being treated as a rapscallion. Dice advantage and a switch to rapscallion only lasts the immediate scene. But now I do what I do best. I roll 2 dice and take the better on combat as Duquesne. I hate goblins. I hate what they are and what they represent. I hate their origin, that they were created by magic from some warped and twisted elven creature. I feel sorry for that original elf being the master work, the master copy of all of these foul refuse that was created from them. 2 dice, a 4 and a 1. I add 1 because I'm destined, and I get myself a 5. Now with that 5, I can defeat a lowly minion, or I can gain a modifier to treat any roll on 5 as 6. Now I'm going to count this as the same scene, so I'm going to say that I slipped a bit on the minion, or I twisted his arm behind his back and said, "Where's your chieftain? He dies tonight." And I'm going to take the modifier of gaining any 5 roll. I'll treat it as a 6. Now, he told me a story, and his gibberish, I can only make out about half of it. Usually I have a companion with me to do this sort of stuff. I could keep him quiet enough, but he wanted to bellow. Alright, let me see if I can make a critical deed to stop him from bellowing. I'm rolling 1 die on that table, adding 1 because I'm destined. 6. Good rolls. It's better to have bad rolls early and good rolls later. A Delver Act. Defeat a minion, defeat a minion or perform a critical deed. That's a critical deed that I've done to find the great beast. I tossed this nitwit aside. He can live with his shame. He probably wouldn't. It wasn't in his nature. Now I'm going to fight one great mob. Would I do it in magic? Well, I could. It's 2 dice and take the lower. But I am Duquesne. Have sword will travel. I walked into that refuge of a tent. He was lying there with his concubines. They all shrieked when I entered. His head was mine. 2 dice. 5 and a 2 plus 1 I'm destined. Defeat the great mob. I took his great head knowing that there was enough of the scars and the warts and the odd shape of it that it could be identified from the wanted posters. Now from here I just move on with my Hex Crawl. I'm going to go down into this sort of this heath here. And again, if I was playing this Empire of the Petal Throne, it would be I'm in sort of a desert, a drier area, and I roll a d6 here, and that d6 would be a 5, would say I got an encounter, and that desert encounter, I'd roll a d8. I don't have any d8 made, but let me just call it a 4. A 4 is non-humans, and then I'd go down to the non-human table, and I might need the patchouli. Forgive me if I'm mangling all the words here, but these are the way I described them as a 12-year-old, so... and I will forever call them, the Schlen Beast or whatever, and with all the inflections, I'm lucky I get Soyani correctly. Do I even get that correctly? Well, you purists can convince me otherwise. I met some non-humans. In this case, I'll go back to the fantasy genre. I met some half-horse and half-humans. They weren't centaurs. They were only 2-legged. They were more horse and head. The horse and head people, I like them. They're not bad company. They don't jaw away all day except when they're chewing. And they told me that the forest, I was better if I err to the side of the east of the forest to get where I'm going, not to directly to south, that a darker influence had invaded the old keep of the Rivermen. The old keep of the Rivermen. It sounded like gold to me. It sounded like an artifact in the waiting. I ignored their good counsel and crossed into the woods. And for me, I would just go back to my Zen Fantasy. I think it's more effective than rolling a random number. And I would say that I'm now in the middle of my quest here, and I'm going to roll a d6, and that d6 is a 3. Overcome a scourge. Okay, so the scourge would probably be the whole forest itself. Maybe I don't want to go too far here because I'm going to attack the river, the keep of the Rivermen, and. The river dried and ages ago. Even I don't remember as a child there being a river, but there must be some water table that had drained this area. Unless the magic trees themselves. Spiders! Good old Tolkien. Spiders! I'd walked into a clutch of them. My feet were caught. And so I go back to my character table. I need a scourge. Get out of the webs and kill the main spiders that are attacking me. I'm rolling 2 dice. New scene. 2 dice. And I rolled a 6 and a 4. This game is too easy, isn't it? That's those are words to die by. And here comes some destined status, so I beat either my great mob or I ended my scourge. That's what I needed to do. I'm going to move on and find this keep of the Rivermen. I'm going to break in and perhaps, let me grab something spooky looking here. This is a good one. Oh my gosh. Hope you were jumped at home. I had that for a different scale of game. Oh, and these pieces as well I grabbed from Battle Brothers. I just took some clip art out of the maps. Just wonderful game. Can't say enough about it. And a large troll, or in Battle Brothers it'd be called an unhole. Large troll came charging out of me, and ho ho ho, troll. I wasn't expecting you. I thought there was some sort of darker art here. I hate the darker art. Oh, that's much to your credit. The darker art didn't leave anything behind that I could perhaps trade for you for. Trade you want, huh? Well, if you go to the south, I left something there that I want recovered. You mean in the Keep of Fairdale? That thing's been ruined. There's nothing left there. No. If you push aside the blue brick in the very far of the vestuary, you'll find something behind it that I would like. It sounds like you're telling me a falsehood, but I like the idea that I can go to the southwest, to the old keep, and go into the vestuary there and see another adventure unfold. I'll be back. Famous last words. Not in my time. And here we go to the characters move down into this area. It's again, it's a very difficult terrain. I could fight more spiders getting there, but I'm going to go right to the keep itself. And I could generate another subquest. There are dungeon crawls as well as hex crawls, and I could pull up maps from a number of different sources. I like Dave Mapper. You know, you've seen me talk about that a number of times. But I'm going to basically say that there's something powerful inside here. Is it a great mob? I'm going to call it a great mob and a scourge. Now, I picked those things because they're right there in my wheelhouse. I can defeat scourges and great mobs easier than I can defeat, getting critical insights and critical deeds. I'm a barbarian. I'm not as much a thinking and plotting person. As I said, my sword and my axe are my method of moving through the game. So, what was the great mob I have to kill, and what is the scourge I have to kill? Dragons are always cool, but, hey, I'm going to go back to this original map here, and I'm going to roll 2 dice 6, and I'm going to roll on the, let's give me some monsters here. Skeletal types, that's good. Give me 2 dice 6 in here and see what I got here. Just 2 dice 6 and call it 4. A 4 would be whites. Barrow whites. Men who died in battle but were never buried. I could see their ghostly images coming at me. That troll was deceiving me in many ways. How about if I fight a D6 Barrow Whites? 3 Barrow Whites. So I got a Scourge, and I got 3 Barrow Whites. Now I'm going to treat those Barrow Whites not as great mobs each. I'm going to treat them just as lowly minions. There's something else I'm going to be fighting. They're going to have a leader pop out at the end. 3 Whites descended on me. Their clutch was freezing cold. Maybe they were behind the weather that had been patterned that had come earlier. Here comes my first roll against the whites. 5 and a 6. Add 1. I'm destined. This was easy. I had my sword, my magically blessed sword, silver edged. I touched the wolf handle, the wolf carved handle, and killed the first one. Second one comes down. 4 and a 4. Add 1 is 5. Sparks flew as my sword off of the opposing sword. This one did not feel that his touch was going to kill me. He had picked up an old falchion and decided that he would attack me with it, but I knocked it out of his hand and cleaved him in 2. The silver was doing his job. 1 more left. I also need to beat that scourge. I'll take the scourge roll here. I got to the blue stone that the troll had told me about. It behind was a crucifix, which seemed very odd. Perhaps it was a memento. You know, some trolls are actually humans that had been transformed by bad magic. I hope that was the case here. Now, I could try to roll a critical insight to see if that was true, but it would probably just complicate my life greatly. Sometimes in a fantasy game, you don't need to understand everything as much as you need to trust the dungeon master. And in this case, I got a pretty good dungeon master in myself. So, I gotta defeat a great mob that'll step out and 1 minion. They tried to double team me. I saw exactly what the lowly minions were protecting. It was a lich of some sort. Probably their general. Stop your blows, and I will see that you are buried. I will consecrate the ground. I will bring back a procession to sing the hymns. Let's see if I can roll 2 dice here. 4 and a 1 becomes a 5. The last of the whites stepped forward, but I brushed him out of the way. I knocked him down with my shield and pierced him. I could tell that his soul was dying. There was nothing left of him, but at least I gave him comfort. And finally, against the great mob, 2 die. 2 die, 1 and a 3. It's getting interesting. Now it was clenched. The lich grabbed me. He was spitting foul insects into my eyes and into my throat. Defeat a lowly minion or gain a modifier. Don't even need a lowly minion here, but I can gain a modifier to treat my next roll as a 4 or 6. I could see the source of his power. He had held on to the battle map that he originally used and caused him his loss and his own death. If I could just strip him of that map without that anchor to hold him in this world, he would be disappeared. So the 4 becomes a 6. Here comes my 2 dice here. It's a 3 and a 4. I'm getting a little better each time. +1 because I'm destined. The sparks flew as I grabbed the map and we tussled back and forth with it. A magic was being emitted from his fingers. I felt his icy chill all the way down to my toes, but I'm going to gain the modifier to treat now 5s to 6s. So 4s to 6s and 5s to 6s. Here comes the dice roll. A 2 and a 2. Interesting. So I am exhausted. Now, I'm exhausted and will become a rapscallion for the remainder of this action. Also, I lose my destined status. I'm still treating 4s to 6s and 5s to 6s. He got the better of me. He knocked my shield out of my hand. He tore my helmet off. I could see the fact that he was going to destroy me. He grabbed me by the ears and was going to sink his teeth deep into my skull. All right, 1 die I'm rolling now. A 1. Wow, and I'm not destined. I was hurt. I would spend the rest of my time as his minion in the dark days and never know why the crucifix of the troll had any value. More later.